Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Welcome to Software Development 2020. I'm not here today, so I want you to have an understanding of the first outcome that we'll be doing. So basically, it's for you to think through what you will be doing for this outcome. So if you read the first paragraph, it says, and by the way, this is on ClassNet, so it's now live. This is your first outcome. It's marked out of 100. I'll go through the criteria with you, and we will be using for this particular app, outcome Unit 3, Area of Study 1, we will be using visualbasics.net or vb.net. So basically, if you read the first paragraph, the students interpret a teacher-provided solution. That means that I'm going to give you what we call the software requirement specifications. That is the functional and non-functional requirements of the app. And what that means is that, you know, if it has a login, if it allows you to save documents, all the functional requirements are basically the function or the code of the app. So whenever the app does anything, for example, as a verb, saving, opening, closing, anything like that, those are functional requirements. Non-functional requirements would be the logo of the organization, the colors, and so on. So I'm going to provide you with the functional and non-functional requirements, which is in this document, and the design tools, which are also in this document. And the design tools, of course, would be your data dictionary, your mockup, your object description, and your pseudocode. And I want you to basically apply a range of functions and techniques, that is using a programming language, in this case visualbasics.net, to develop your app and the app that I'm asking you to do, which is called Teachers Cloud Health Mobile, and to test it, see if it works. So you're going to also include, for those of you who have done programming before, you're going to use validation techniques like range checks, existence check. You might be used to validation techniques when you fill out a form online. You know, there'll be little red stars or areas that are required. Required fields means that there's an existence check, that you've at least attempted to put your age. So these are this is an existence check validation technique, which basically is there so that the app and the user can interact properly, in the sense that the user you will get from the user the best data you possibly can. And finally, internal documentation, which is a description of the code within your app. And of course, these descriptions do not get read as code. So note, it says here, note that the working modules do not have to be a complete solution. So this is sort of a prototype and can focus on a number of limited features. A prototype means it's not a completed app. It's just really for you to have met enough of the criteria to be able to produce the basic app. And of course, in the real world, it would require a lot more work, as you will see when you read the little case study. So we use VB.net, which is an object-oriented programming language, to develop the application. VB.net is an integrated development environment, or sometimes known as IDE. So let's start. So the software requirement specification, SRS, for Teachers Cloud Health is they're located in Victoria, and you know, they really want to be able to have instant and accurate healthcare quotations, and search for those quotations and orders. When I say orders, quotation, you can use these words interchangeably. When customers inquire about quotations, so they want to sell basically to teachers accurate healthcare quotations so that they can basically sell them a healthcare plan. Second is they want to collect information about treatments customers receive in order to process timely refunds for out-of-pocket expenses. So you'll have to have sort of a function where they can submit, for example, a picture or a PDF of an invoice. So for example, if they go and get a treatment and then they want to get reimbursed, the app should be able to capture that. So the company sells healthcare plans, mainly from their website, but also from their sales staff who visit the school, who have a laptop. So you're going to develop this app for a laptop that the staff member will take. Now you're assuming that at this stage that the laptop will run Windows 10. In other words, you're going to be using the desktop computers in the lab to build these, which are Windows 10 as an operating system, and you'll be using VB.NET on those to produce this app. So you just have to assume that the staff will be using Windows 10. Now, if you have a Windows machine as your laptop, you certainly can start building your app on your laptop if you have Visual Studio installed. So either 2010 or higher. We'll talk about that in class when I get back the following day. So they do want to go around and sell basically their products. So what I've done is I've given you the insurance plan. So if you use a select case or another method to display these particular products, you'll see that, well, the Teachers Cloud Health, they sell health insurance plans, but they also sell, and you can see the prices there per year and a little description. So you might be able to incorporate that. You'll need to incorporate that in your app. If you scroll down, you also see that they offer additional insurance products, and that could be travel insurance, motor vehicle insurance, home insurance, and life insurance. So essentially what you'll need to do is to create some code that allows you to, the user, in this case the salesperson, to select these items on your Windows form and to save them in some form of order. So in other words, save it as a text file or other data structures. Now, so the functional requirements are described here. So you need to provide a quotation to the customer, which means you need to basically able to save that customer. And so later on, you can save that once the order is saved. The idea is that you can send that quotation to the company's database server. And in your case, you're not going to be asked to do the coding for that, simply that you'll be able to export or save, if you want, the order, for example, on your H drive, which simulates basically an external drive. So of course you could save it to your C drive, but in this case you want to save it so if you're using the school computer, you're going to save it, this particular ticket or order, whenever you've finished it. When you submit it, you should be able to save it to your H drive. Now, for those of you using your laptop, you'll need to do that where you can actually save it, for example, to a USB drive, or even potentially see if you can save it to a cloud drive, like if it's a text file, for example, or another data structure. You should be able to save it, right, to an external drive other than your own laptop or other than the PC that you're working on in the computer lab. So that's a simulation, if you want, of as if you were uploading that particular order for that particular customer to a database server. So here you have basically what the customer order needs to include. So the customer order needs to include the various insurance products, the product ID, the date and time of the order, the contact details of the customer, such as name, in other words, first name, surname, phone number, email address, and finally a calculation of the cost of the customer order. So if they've ordered maybe 2 products, you want to be able to have a total. So you'll need to include a calculation in your product, in your app. So as I said, you need to store this to a text file or other data structures. These orders will need to be uploaded to an external drive, as I said, simulating the database server. A list of daily orders must be saved in a text file so that the staff can keep track of the history of their orders. So this includes the ability to search and sort insurance products and by either ID or by surname. So again, here you've got a little bit of interesting coding. You're going to have to learn how to do a bit of a search and a sort of some basic form in your product. In other words, your app will need to have some functional requirement. In other words, the ability to search and the ability to sort insurance orders. You want to be able to password protect your app, so you'll need to have a login form, which most of you will be familiar with, and some validation techniques, as I mentioned before, existence check and so on, range check and data type check. So finally, when the order is completed, you should be able to, the sales staff will be able to review the order. Okay, that's what they ordered, and simply save that order. The non-functional requirements, as I mentioned to you, are things like which immediately appear here, which is, the app needs to be user-friendly. Well, what does that mean? Well, it needs to be easy to use. So using combo boxes, select cases, menu strips are things that we're used to when we use any kind of app. And of course, you want to have the logo displayed, the teacher's health cloud health, displayed on all forms. So below is basically what's called the software design representation. So there's really several ways of me telling you, well, this is what I want your app to include. So there are design tools. So for example, a data dictionary or an object description or mockups and pseudocode are basically me telling you as students, hey, here are the designs that I want included in this app. So let's go straight to data dictionary. As you can see from the data dictionary, it's a very simple concept, and that is that the data dictionary describes the name of variables. So if you use a variable first name, surname, and so on, then your variable for first name will be F, capital N, and so on. Email will be a variable, product ID will be a variable, insurance product. So it's really just a description of how I would like you to name your variables. However, if you have different variables you include and this isn't the set in stone, it's really looking at least incorporating some of these variables in your product. The second tool is object description. That's probably the easiest one. For those of you who've done coding before, you know that you name objects or buttons, BTN, enter, CBox insurance, which will be a combo box, a text box will be TXT price, and so on. So for those of you who know, part of the grade that you get is, of course, that you name your objects properly within your code. Then finally, here's another object example, and finally, the mockups. The mockups are basically very much to your discretion of how you want the interface, sometimes known as the GUI, the graphical user interface. This is how you want it to look like. But I'm kind of suggesting, well, make sure you include some of these features in your forms so that it sort of looks like that. That's one of my mockups. Second and third are down here. These are got on the web. They're sort of, again, mock-ups of what you would like the app to look like, what the opening form, what the login form would look like, what the main order form would look like, where you may have a form where you add a receipt for to get reimbursement. So basically, here's another order form, pretty basic and not terribly good, but there it is. So finally, the pseudocode is basically, pseudo means false or not real code. It's basically written in English. So this is a login pseudocode, and it just says that a valid input is required. And in this case, it has to be, if it's a valid input, it has to turn to true. In other words, the valid input for the password has to be true. The valid input for the username has to be true. Otherwise, they can't log in. So this is just a brief description of a code that tells you, gives you feedback, which is important. It tells you, well, look, you need to have the correct username and the correct password. And then eventually, after a while, it'll display the form that you want to enter. This is a little complicated, little bit longer written. How can I say? Pseudocode for a login. For those of you who've done it before, you'll find that maybe a little long, but there it is. Here's a linear search. It really just gives you an idea of what a linear search looks like, which is basically what I would suggest. If you have a linear search of ID numbers or names, it just starts from the first one until it finds, let's say if you're looking for 110, then basically it'll go through the list until it hits 110 and it'll display that. Just again, little explanation of a linear search, but you can find very good videos online about this. Here's another pseudocode for linear search, and then a little bit of selection sort pseudocode. So basically, you can find your job essentially is not to write pseudocode for the selection sort or the linear search. Your job is to actually get the app to do a little search and to do a little sort. Doesn't have to be overly fancy. Of course, the more complicated ones will get just those additional marks and bonus points. So now I just want to talk a little bit about how to interpret the solution design. And so essentially you get 15 marks for you to really understand everything that the app should have. So you should try and include all the functions that the app should have, even if they don't all work. In the end, you can still get 15 marks because you've incorporated all the logos there, the search is there, the sort is there, all the functions that I've asked you to do, you try to incorporate them in the GUI or in the interface itself. But of course, just having an interface doesn't make a program work. It's the coding behind the buttons, behind the text boxes, behind the combo boxes, which is where we go to part 2, which is basically apply 15 marks for applying a range of functions and programming language. And then you'll see that both 15 and 20 marks are really about the bulk. So 35 marks is really about the code that you use. So look, I'll explain more when I get back, but I'll explain more later, but this is the bulk of the work, that you have a search, that you have a sort, that you use select cases, that you have control structures and functions. And functions means that you can add up a ticket, or add up a quotation for a customer that they've ordered 2 different types of products, and you basically get a total of 2 numbers. Again, here you can see part of the coding development talks about validation techniques. And wow, look, you get 20 marks for that. Those are definitely worth putting in there. So there you go. What we have is 15 marks, 20 marks, and 20 marks for your development. So basically building what we call applying a range of functions and techniques using a programming language. So now we're down to part 3, which is your internal documentation. I'll talk about that when I get back, but it's basically just annotating your code. And in this code, you'll explain what it does. So if you says here how the code works, so what does the code do, and why you use this code. Well, I used it because this was a convenient way to create a login form, or it was a convenient way for me to save the quotation. And part 4 is finally testing. And we'll talk about testing tables later, and we'll use both a testing table and a traditional testing table. You know, here's the test I ran, here's what it did, and here's what I had to fix to make it work. And finally, a trace table for the total, an outcome of 100%. So look, have a look at all this. Try to get your head around during, I would start by looking at a bit of coding, how to do the coding for this. And for those of you who've done some coding in VB.NET, maybe start thinking about building this app and start looking particularly for things that you haven't done in the past, which is search codes and sort. So there it is. That's your first outcome for 2020.